Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on this solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, clean your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, we see that things are going from bad to worse for the New York billionaire, businessman, real estate tycoon, and all-around Bulgarian, Donald J. Trump. And, of course, that is not to be unexpected, because we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have been attempting to warn you for nearly a year now about just the disastrous scope of consequences that would result from selecting him as the Republican nominee. Now, of course, the Lion Branch Trumpidians are going to point out some recent developments with the loss of some of the Never Trump people, and that is just part of their campaign. It's really amazing to see that it was Moose Camp that had lost, but again, it really doesn't speak with any respect to the mafioso Quafioso himself and the way that he has been attempting to foist the Republican Party into a untenable situation. And the reason that I can say that with the perfect amount of clarity that I do as I sit here speaking into this microphone, conveying this message unto you, is that we've seen a repeated course of conduct, on the part of Donald J. Trump that is unacceptable for anyone who is vying for the highest office in the land. As we have so oft-times reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, if you want to vie for the highest office in the land, you have got to prove to the American people that you are qualified to wield that power. And let's not be mistaken here, folks, because there is a lot of power at the disposal, in fact, at the immediate disposal of the Commander-in-Chief and Chief Executive Officer of these United States of America. And therefore, what Trump is trying to do is basically weasel his way into that office without giving us any policy particulars. And in fact, there have been reports from all sides of the salivating mainstream media which claims that even Trump's biggest supporters, or is that bigliest supporters, are begging that he gets off of the campaign tactic and strategy of identity or personality politics and focus on policy matters. But here's the deal, folks. Trump has no idea about policy. He never has, and he thinks that he can win going into the general election cycle using the same tried and threadbare tactics and strategies, the scorched earth policies that he employed during the primary process. Now, making matters worse is the fact that he continues to aim his political guns, for lack of a better term, at fellow Republicans instead of Hillary Rotten Clinton. So that undermines all of the arguments of the Lion Branch Trumpidians that we have to accept the candidacy of the mafioso Quafioso, or the Quaffwaffler himself, because he is better than Hillary Clinton. Why? He's attacking Republicans at a more vigorous rate than even the Democrats. And then, of course, we have the disastrous president now, the Chiquita-in-Chief, the President Peel and Squeal himself, coming out and condemning and chastising Republicans for having selected Donald J. Trump as their nominee for the general election slated later this November. You see, it plays directly into the hands of the frothing-at-the-mouth Fabian socialist leftists who are hell-bent on utterly annihilating the United States of America both as a nation and as a people. I wish this weren't so. I wish this wasn't the case. And on top of this, I wish that I had words of comfort and solace to provide you as I sit here and speak into this microphone, purveying this message unto you, but there really is no such words of comfort, solace, or assistance to you. But what we can do is we can look into what exactly is going on right now here in the United States of America and try and figure out exactly how we can address this to overcome the problems that are facing us. Now, we know that Donald J. Trump is just unacceptable. as a candidate for the United States of America. And the reason we can say this is you look at his past positions, which have been wholly consistently inconsistent, and it is not working at all because he has no conservative values. For the vast majority of his 70 years spent on God's green earth, he has not once espoused true conservative values, and miraculously, seemingly overnight, when he decided to officially throw his quaff into the ring last July, all of a sudden he began to embrace conservative positions. Folks, if that seems a bit fishy or peculiar, it's because it is. That is what we are facing right here and right now. And it's sad. It's sad that we have such a egomaniac trying to vie for the highest office in the land. Now, what you see with Trump, particularly with respect to the way that he was going after the Khan family, irrespective of what you think of the Khan family, that was a trap. He took the bait. Hillary is running circles around him, and this is where his quote-unquote outsider status has come into the limelight. And it's bad. It's bad because he is ill-equipped to handle it. He's too narcissistic to care about it, and it's as though he doesn't want to win. But if you recall, about a year ago, he actually stated that he didn't want to win. And Stephanie, who ran one of his political action committees, or PACs, said that they had received directives from the Trump campaign in direct violation of federal election law to just get him in there at second place, just to get him in at a foothold. But it doesn't really balance out. It doesn't really play out in the best interest of movement conservatives. But what we see is that the gutless opposition party, or GOP, has positioned itself in such a way as to be diametrically opposed to true movement conservatives. Of course, we've known that's been the case. In election cycle after successive election cycle, the top wing of the gutless opposition party, or what is known in the common vernacular as the so-called establishment wing of the Republican Party, has always been opposed to conservatism. You know, before Rush Limbaugh, whom we refer to as Lush Bimbo here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, decided to drink the quaff-aid, he said that the establishment of the Republican Party looked upon the conservative base with a sense of embarrassment. But now he's sold his soul for 30 pieces of over-bleached pieces of dandruff. And he has essentially abandoned all of the conservative principles that he's been preaching about on the open airwaves at the supposed EIB network for, nearly 30 years now. And that's the troubling aspect of the 2016 presidential election cycle. People that who we once thought of as staunch conservatives, people who we thought were intrinsically part of our movement, have betrayed us time and again, and it is devastating in some respect, but it also provides us with a breath of fresh air. It provides us with a direction to head so that we can organize and move past the deleterious and detrimental impacts that have been unleashed upon the body politic of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours, and pick ourselves up by the bootstrap and dust ourselves off. Because we do have to prepare for the next day. Irrespective of what may try and foist upon us, the battle for the soul of this nation is far from over. And we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, as we have dedicated and promised on previous episodes, will be the new resistance. We will be the voice of freedom in these United States of America to help you, the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, overcome all of these hurdles, obstacles, and adversity that have been placed in your path so that we can begin the process of placing the United States of America back onto the path of prosperity. Now, I know that's far easier said than done, but nothing worth having is ever easy to achieve or obtain. So, what do we see happening right now? Well, we see in conservative review that we've now hit rock bottom as establishment money and lies beat a conservative warrior in Kansas. And this is what the Lion Branch Trumpidians are going to try and just use in their message, their propaganda. Now, this is the man that I meant to mention early on. It's Tim Hulskamp in Kentucky, who had a conservative review rating of 91%. He was defeated. And they're going to say that this was because of his opposition to the mafioso quafioso. But I do not believe that to be the case. In fact, I know it is not the case. What is happening here is, as usual, the top wing of the gutless opposition party, who, oh, by the way, has thrown their full weight of support behind the mafioso quafioso, are doing whatever they can to bring down conservative movements, true movement conservatives. And it is just shocking to see that Trump managed to secure, allegedly, the gutless opposition party, or GOP's nomination, by just shrouding himself in this claim that he is a political outsider, when in fact nothing could be further from the truth. When you look at what he did, he is the one that has enabled some of the worst frothing at the mouth Fabian socialists, whom we've oftentimes referred to as destructive and deleterious political movements here in the United States. They don't care about the American people. They're not about advancing you. They're in it for themselves. They're in it for their own political aggrandizement, and that is working to our great detriment. But unless and until we realize this and begin to come to terms with it, we are going to continue to see these problems continue unabated at an accelerated rate, which is only going to accelerate exponentially as we go on in the future. That is why we, as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, must come together, standing shoulder to shoulder in solidarity and unity, to let these frauds know that enough is enough, that we're not going to tolerate these attacks on the values that we hold near and dear, and that have propelled this nation to such lofty heights in our relatively brief yet illustrious history. Because if you recall, the United States of America is the longest contiguous or uninterrupted running, constitutionally endowed representative republic in all of the course of human events. That is an irrefutable fact. It is a fact of nature, for lack of a better term. So what we must do is be willing to stand up to these people at every given opportunity. But the scope of the problem comes in that there is a backlash. According to ABC News, Kansas ousted 11 conservative lawmakers. Is this the beginning of a tidal wave against conservatism? No, I don't believe so. I believe that there will be a corrective action. But a lot of people are going to sit there and buy into the fear-mongering that is being peddled by the detente wing of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, when they try and say that Hillary is the biggest evil that's ever been there. But the problem is, if you are a political party, if you are a political movement, you must stand for something. You must have your own position. And traditionally, that has been strict adherence to the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. However, at this current junction in history, we see that that's the furthest thing from what the Republican Party stands for and represents. We have conflicting messages being put out by Mike Pence, the squish, who is Trump's VP candidate, and from the mafioso quafioso himself. And then we see that the mafioso quafioso has so many public relations blunders that he is essentially handing this election to Hillary. All of the polls, even though we don't give much credence to polls here on Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, because they have so oft times in previous election cycles just been blatantly wrong, but he's basically handing this to Hillary. She is pulling ahead of him by a huge margin. Folks, if you stop and think about this in an objective fashion, it's because there are far too many people who are beginning to realize that the mafioso quafioso is never who he claimed to be. That he is a con artist, a carnival barker, a snake oil salesman, a huckster. He is the P.T. Barnum of our era. And we have bought into his lies and his chicanery, hook, line, and sinker, and that is working to our great detriment, both as a political movement and as a political party. But remember what Ben Sass said earlier, that political parties are just there to be something that allows people who are like-minded to congregate and more easily coalesce to have power in numbers. It's like the old adage that two heads or multiple heads are much greater than one. Here's the deal. Donald J. Trump has so hopelessly divided the base of the gutless opposition party that we literally do not stand a chance heading into the general election cycle slated for later this November. There is no other way to put that, folks. There's no way to sugarcoat that or to candy coat that. This is just the fact. These are self-evident truths that we must prepare ourselves for. But Trump himself has gone out with language essentially claiming that he is preparing himself for defeat, claiming that, again, the election cycle is rigged. I've never heard any candidate whine half as much as the mafioso Quafioso. I thought he was big. I thought he was tough. I thought he was supposed to be this greatly bigly businessman who would always surround himself with the best people that would know what is in the best interest of the American people. Because that's certainly what the propaganda wing at Quof News, the Fox News Network, would have us all believe. That's certainly what their 24-hour, 7-day-a-week news coverage cycle would seem to suggest with respect to the mafioso Quafioso. But when the rubber meets the road, when we look at the objective, cold, hard facts, we see nothing could be further from the truth. But of course, Quof News is in its own bit of a political dilemma right now with all of the sexual harassment allegations that have been leveled against Roger Ailes. And the evidence is clearly indicating that there was something there. And so here's something I have to ask, because Rush Limbaugh, whose television program back when he had it all those decades ago, was produced by Roger Ailes. And he went out into the golden tinfoil plate-covered microphone and proclaimed that he never knew of any such things, and that seemed so out of character for Roger Ailes. Irrespective of that, if the great weight of the evidence establishes it, and it can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, then Quof News has a major problem. And of course, Rupert Murdoch brought his children, his sons in to run the network, and they are, of course, just ardent fans of Thunder Thigh Queen herself, Hillary Rodham Clinton. So what does this spell for the once pillar, or supposed pillar, of at least establishment conservative, quote-unquote, punditry and commensurate? Well, it shows that there is a type of rot, cultural rot and decay, that is occurring within the rank and file of those who just immediately threw their weight behind the mafioso Quafioso, the New York billionaire businessman, real estate tycoon, and all-around Bulgarian Donald J. Trump, who also happens to go by, on any day, the two alter egos of John Barron and John Miller. You see, that is intellectually disingenuousness on their part, to go forth and to essentially attack the one true constitutional compositionist who was in the race, Texas Senator Ted Cruz, to buy into these uncorroborated reports and unreferenced reports of the National Enquirer that comes out of Alexander Dugin, who is Putin's right-hand man. And oh, by the way, we now have even more reports that Paul Manafort is directly on the payroll of the Russian Federation with respect to the Ukraine incident. Now, isn't that funny? Because Trump has come out and said essentially that Putin has no aims or designs for the Ukraine. Seriously? What was this whole Crimea thing? What have we been witnessing over there in Eastern Europe for the past 2 years? Folks, this is intellectual disingenuousness. This is an attempt to foist the political wool over your eyes and to continue with a propagandistic narrative that has no place in an open and honest society like that of the United States of America. And again, it's why we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, always come and produce these shows for you. Because our ultimate aim and objective here is to empower you with the knowledge and information that will help you foster a fluent and working knowledge and understanding not only of our shared United States Constitution, but also of your fundamental and inalienable rights which were endowed to you by your Creator, none other than the God of nature himself. So why is it that we find ourselves in such a deleterious position? Well, it's because Donald J. Trump is just out there. He's so out there. And in fact, we now see, according to Red State, that the GOP is in panic mode. They're in panic mode because Donald J. Trump is a disaster. It's like a slow-motion train wreck. And isn't that funny and ironic? Because the whole imagery of the Trump campaign has been that of being the Trump train. Well, clearly, the Trump train is not acting in the best interest of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, we the people. But what we see is that 24 to 72 hours are going to be crucial because there are some serious reports here of Republicans coming out hard against Trump. And, of course, what's funny is Trump has come out and said that he wouldn't support Paul Ryan. He essentially twisted Paul Ryan's words of saying that he just wasn't there yet before Ryan ultimately endorsed Trump. And now Trump's trying to use that against him. This shows that he holds grudges. And it also shows in full color that Donald J. Trump is not about unifying the party. Again, this is why he said it is the Republican Party and not the Conservative Party. He was essentially attempting to slam the door shut on movement conservatives, the very thing that Lush Bimbo used to complain about, but now apparently seems fine with as he has thrown his girth behind the mafioso quafioso. But again, that leads to direct questions of how does this directly benefit the country? Of course, the answer is not. And here's the interesting thing. The Guardian newspaper has quoted Trump. Trump said, "I like Paul, but these are horrible times for our country. We need very, very strong leadership." There again, a push for totalitarianism. And I'm just not quite there yet. The Republican nominee said of the House Speaker. But Ryan's campaign spokesman said that neither Speaker Ryan nor anyone on his team has ever asked for Donald Trump's endorsement. So you know what that tells me, folks? It tells me that there is still a great divide within the rank and file, not only of the détente wing of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, but through the entire party itself. Donald Trump has instigated a great civil war that was just simmering beneath the surface. Something that we have oft-times warned about on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. But now we must come to terms with it, because if we remain this divided, there is no way to win in the general election, other than to vote for true constitutional compositionists down. At this point, unless some miracle happens, we are stuck with this buffoon as our nominee. And he is an impending disaster. He, in no way, shape, or form, is going to do anything that directly benefits movement conservatives, because he's diametrically opposed to movement conservatives. He has espoused progressive positions for the vast majority of his 70 years spent on God's green earth. That is just a self-evident truth. Those are just the facts, folks. And unless and until we embrace them and begin to work a contingent plan to fully address them, we are going to continue to see this fiasco and disaster unfurl before our very eyes. And the outcome is going to be horrendous. There is no other way to describe it. But we see that there were all of these shenanigans that occurred on the convention floor there in Cleveland, Ohio, a couple of weeks ago at the Republican National Convention, and yet the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media have refused to cover it in any meaningful shape, form, or fashion. And then we see that Trump has also come out and said that he's going to raise a super PAC to run against Ted Cruz in his 2018 Senate re-election bid, which, by the way, folks, that's highly illegal. Highly illegal. For a politician to be doing that? Again, it shows that Trump has no working knowledge of how the Constitution works. But that should come as no surprise to anyone, because he said that he's found no value in it. He's claimed that there is this Article 12 within the Constitution, of which there are only 7 articles. So how does that work? It really doesn't. But what I love is that the Lion Branch Trumpidians have tried to come to his defense, genuflecting their political ideals into such a twisted spaghetti mess that's like a pretzel, in saying that, well, he meant the 10th Amendment. because that would have been the 12th article, except that the Bill of Rights, or the first 10 amendments to our shared United States Constitution, is separate and apart, distinct and individualized from the articles. That's the amazing thing. It shows they don't know how to read the Constitution. Or they do, but they're being totally intellectually disingenuous about it to defend their fearless leader, who is this unmitigated train wreck of a disaster and is the only candidate who could have possibly lost to Hillary Rotten Clinton. And that's bad when you had candidates such as Rick Sanitarium and Mike Huckleberry and also John the Mushroom Kasich and Lindsey Grahamnesty. So this is the anemic position that the gutless opposition party finds itself just less than 100 days heading into the election. This is a very untenable situation. Now, to what's fascinating from the reports of NBC News, they've said that GOP and Trump go from unraveling to broken glass. So what we know is that Donald Trump's campaign is seemingly in disarray over his inexplicable clash with the Khan family. Of course, this was a trap, a bait and switch that was set by Hillary Rotten Clinton. And it goes to something that my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, has so oft-times reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, The Wright Flyer. And that is this, that Hillary Clinton is meticulous. She is very patient. She is stacking the deck against Donald Trump, and that is going to work to our great detriment in the general election cycle. And unless and until we are able to overcome this and to deal with this, then the Republican Party is slated for instantaneous, unavoidable, catastrophic defeat in the general election. So here's what happened. In a Washington Post interview, Trump has declined to endorse House Speaker Paul Ryan, which I mentioned earlier. He slapped out at Republican Senator Kelly Ayotte, saying, "She has given me zero support." Who cares? You are supposed to be the leader of the party. If you cannot lead the party, how can you be such a great businessman? How can you be the great person that your propaganda and your most vocal and ardent acolytes have professed? I wonder how Matt Drudge is going to try and twist that one, folks, because there really is no way to twist it. Then he suggested that Americans should pull their 401k funds out of the stock market. And do what? Put it in Trump's stake? None of his companies are publicly traded, which again shows why it is imperative that we have his income tax returns reported, just as he declared that the detente candidate back in 2012, Mitt Romney, should have done. It's not going to work. Then here's something that really ought to get your blood boiling as a decent, hardworking, red-blooded American citizen and cherished listening passenger and audience member of our state-of-the-art radio program. He took a Purple Heart from a service member and said that he's always wanted to receive a Purple Heart, but that having one gifted to him by a supporter was much easier. Why do you have to slap our service members in the face? We know that you thought that your sexual escapades during the Vietnam War era, where you were a draft dodger claiming that you had bone spurs that then miraculously healed, was a reason not to go into combat. No. You have to spit in the face of those brave service members. It's disgusting. Of course, he also said that Khazir Khan was bothered by his plan to keep terrorists out of the country. Whether that's true or not, it's not good imagery. It's basically playing right into the hands of the frothing of the mouth Stadian socialist leftists who are hell-bent on the utter annihilation of the United States of America, both as a nation and as a people. And, of course, that's not going to help anything. Then he is feuding with a crying baby during a rally, giving conflicting statements, and then making fun of the mother as she was trying to leave. Folks, what in the hell is he doing? What in the hell is this? This is not leadership. This is not what we expect from someone who is vying for the highest office in the land. It shows he is a loose cannon who has no control over his words, deeds, and actions, and therefore is not fit, nor is he qualified to be our commander-in-chief and chief executive officer in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. I'm sorry, folks, there is no way to sugarcoat that. And I'm certainly not going to do intellectual somersaults like Lush Bimbo to try and defend this man when I've been trying to warn, along with my first officer and my first air marshal, that he is a danger to movement conservatives, that he could irreparably harm the conservative movement for generations to come. And yet there are those who will still blindly, willingly serve whatever filth that he throws out there. Now, here's what's funny is that we have a sitting GOP congressman, Richard Hanna, the HP head, or Hewlett-Packard head, Meg Whitman, and former Christie aide, Maria Comella, all saying they plan to vote for Hillary Clinton. Now, you may say that that is a poor reflection on them, but no, I think it's a pure protest vote. I'm not going to do that because I can't stand the witch. And we are free to exercise our fundamental and inalienable God-given right to vote however we so feel is best suited for our interests. That's something that we've always said here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, because it's the God's honest truth. Nobody owns your vote but you. And that's part of the reason why we loathe and despise this whole notion of a tyranny of false unity. Because said tyranny of false unity does not coalesce with or line up with the true impetus of what it is that makes the United States of America great. And again, that's more evidence that is directly contradictory or standing in staunch opposition, diametrically opposed to the shallow, hollow, empty, and meaningless platitude that has been adopted as the Trump train's campaign slogan, Make America Great Again. Now, as you know, we have oft-times reiterated, time and again to the point of it being ad nauseum, that America has never ceased being great. That it is a foolish line, and that it is fodder for the Democrats to use in their relentless campaign against the mafioso quafioso. He's already headed into this as an uphill battle because he's dismantled his campaign staff and personnel and all of the primary and caucus states that he has won throughout this process, but it's just not working. It was just part of his plan. And we must be vigilant, ever vigilant, because what is happening to us is directly contradictory to the values that we hold near and dear. It is placing us in this precarious position to such an extent that we will never be able to overcome the hurdles and obstacles and adversity if we don't wake up. That's right, America. This is a wake-up call. This 2016 presidential election cycle should be a wake-up call to each and every one of us to help us overcome the problems that have been directly placed purposefully in our path. So how do we overcome it? The way we overcome it is we go back to basics. We go back to the fundamental tenets that are contained with the clear and concise language within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. It really is that black and white. It is really that crystal clear. It is really that simple. But it has to be done in such a way that we are standing up for our values. Otherwise, we are going to lose our conservative movement. We are going to be placed in such a precarious position that even more drastic measures will need to be taken. And as it stands now, even more drastic measures may need to be taken anyway, because of the deleterious spot and position that we find ourselves in right now as I sit here and speak into this microphone. And folks, unless and until this country realizes the path of depravity that we're on here in the United States, we are not going to find ourselves better political high ground. I wish I had words of solace and comfort to provide you, with respect to this, but I simply do not. It is just the case and position that we find ourselves in. So what is it with Trump that makes it to where he cannot do the right thing, that he is just a major part of the problem? Well, it comes down to what he's always been, and that is this. He is a frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist who, for as far back as he can remember, has always been a progressive. And now, suddenly, he is the savior. Again, this is why we have to stop looking for some messianic figure to come out of providence above and save us. The only ones who will be capable of saving us are none other than we the people. That is the way that our representative Republican form of government was created. It was designed in such a way as to ensure that no one singular individual, entity, or branch of government could ever take over the reins of political power. And that's just it. But we see that with Trump, he's willing to just keep reaching out to Russia, demanding that they come and assist him in opposition research against Hillary. I don't care whether he was joking or not. That's not the sort of thing that you joke about, particularly when you are vying for the highest office in the land, when you are seeking to have and wield the utmost authority. And when you already have an established track record of an authoritarian streak, that will not play out well with the electorate. It certainly is not going to play out well with true constitutional compositionists. And of course, that's what we've been warning about on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flight. The time to act is now. The time to let these charlatans, these frauds, these hucksters, these snake oil salesmen, and these carnival barkers know that they cannot, must not, and will not ever decide or dictate the fate of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours destiny. Because they are not big enough to do it. They are not given that sort of power. And it's amazing, as we get ever closer to the general election cycle here, we see that even the British press, BBC News, has come out and said that Donald Trump sees more Republican support drift. And it's because he takes such statements. Richard Hanna of New York became the first Republican congressman to publicly declare that he would vote for Democrat Hillary Clinton. Now that's really bad when it's coming out of your home state. Other Republicans have distanced themselves from Trump as well. His statements and policies are just disastrous. And here is a list of people not voting for Trump. Now, not all of them are conservatives, but in this campaign, you're going to find a lot of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So we have Barbara Bush, former First Lady, Jeb Bush, former Florida governor, William Cohen, who was a former Secretary of Defense, Jeff Flake, an Arizona senator who is not anything other than a top member of the Gutless Opposition Party, Lindsey Graham, Larry Hogan, who is Maryland's governor, John Kasich, surprise, surprise, Mark Kurt, Mitt Romney, Elena Ross-Lighton, who is a Florida congresswoman, Ben Sasse, who is a true constitutional compositionist. Then you have people like Richard Armitage, who was a former deputy Secretary of State, voting for Clinton. Same with Hank Paulson, a former Treasury Secretary. Brent Scowcroft, a former National Security Advisor, is also voting for her. And, of course, Richard Hanna. What does this mean? It means that this buffoon is trying to drive a stake into the heart of the Gutless Opposition Party, or GOP, that is leaving us in this precarious, untenable, and unsustainable situation. And unless and until we begin to fully address this, and unless and until we begin to come to a consensus with respect to our shared Constitution being the supreme law of the land, as is unequivocally stated in Article 6, Clause 2, what is commonly referred to as the Supremacy Clause, these divisions are only going to grow worse. But the duty, the obligation, and the responsibility is on our shoulder, and on our shoulder alone. And then, of course, you have the past statements of Donald Trump where he said that he thought Planned Parenthood did good work. And, of course, we also know that throughout the entire scope and process of the RNC there in Cleveland, Ohio, the pro-life plank was not even mentioned once. It was closed out with an Islamic prayer. Does this sound like a conservative, or does this sound like somebody who is a frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist who is hell-bent on the complete and utter annihilation of our shared representative republic? I think it's the latter rather than the former. And we must come back to what matters to us as Republicans, but not Republicans, because that is too limiting, as constitutional compositionists. Again, folks, this is why my first officer, Jeremy Grafington, and I have proposed the establishment of the constitutional compositionist movement, a movement that is not wedded to any one individual or particular political party or movement, one that can lobby for our constitutional interests. And, of course, the sad state of affairs is that we shouldn't even have to do that in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours, yet this is the detrimental position, the precarious place or spot that we find ourselves as I sit here speaking into this microphone, conveying this message unto you. It must come to a swift and immediate end. But, of course, that's always easier said than done. It is always easier said than done. But here we are, in this untenable situation. And unless and until we begin to fully comprehend what it is that is working against us, what is working in such a deleterious and detrimental fashion, we have no way of getting around this. We have no way of supplementing or fixing the problems that face us. And they are only going to grow exponentially worse as time continues her relentless march into the future. So, we must be the ones that act in a proactive fashion. But now we see again from Red State that, wait, did Donald Trump just steal an idea from a Democrat congressman? And there's a video with this, folks. And I think that it needs to be focused upon, clearly focused upon, so that we can address the problems that are facing this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, and be the robust people that we are and that we always have been. And I've got the video here. It's almost 4 minutes, so bear with me, but I'm going to play it back for you here, folks. And here we go.
Political columnist Charles Hurt. Charles, I've not heard that before. I don't think you had either. Sounds like a plan that gets the debate back on track of how do we get to prosperity.
Yeah, I had not heard any of those details either. And this is where Donald Trump is at his best, when he's kind of conjuring up plans like this, talking about infrastructure, talking about things that people have a lot of faith in him. People love to, Democrats love to make fun of him about his big buildings with his names on it, in gold. But, that is something that people, that's a positive for him. Yeah. People view that as being something good. They like people who build things. And one thing you can't deny is that Donald Trump does build things. And, we spend so much time talking about foreign policy, talking about all these, the terrible things that are going on around the world, Hillary Clinton's emails, all that stuff is vitally important. But, as you know, this election will turn on the economy. It's going to, what people vote for is the pocketbook.
And Charles, therefore, Donald Trump has to stop taking the bait.
Yeah.
Seriously, I mean, the media...
I just have to interject here, folks. It's not about the economy. It is about the woeful state of our supreme law of the land, that of our shared United States Constitution. But they go on even further with this Trump love fest over there at the Quoth Business News Network. And here we go.
Yeah. Is universally opposed to Trump. They try to provoke him at every conceivable opportunity, and Trump, unfortunately, so often responds to the provocation. He's got to stop doing that.
Yeah, he is impulsive, and when he's attacked, he cannot resist. And I feel like this whole thing.
Oh wait, that's exactly what we said he would do.
Of a media, something that the media is blowing way, way, way out of proportion. But your point is exactly right. He shouldn't have taken the bait. He should, he should know better than to try to when Stephanopoulos tried to bait him on the business about, what sacrifices have you made. You just say there's no sacrifice like the sacrifice that the Khans made, right, and move on. But he can't. And I think that part of the thing that people like about him is that he's so authentic. He obviously didn't go to political answers training school, because everybody knows how to answer that question except Donald Trump. And he's always fighting, and I think people do like that.
Who do his supporters really want? Do they want to nail down, reined-in Donald Trump, a professional politician Donald Trump, or do they want him unleashed, where he just does?
I don't think they know. I don't think they know.
The middle, well, that's the wrong word. We'll give him problems with the middle ground.
Yeah, the problem is that, and I agree with you, and it's the unleashed Donald Trump that is the most entertaining and most enjoyable and most effective. But there are certain circumstances where he needs to learn to just rein it in a little bit. And as you say, don't take the bait. And I'm so glad you tested him, because he needs to be tested again and again and again until he stops taking the bait.
You're right. I offered it to him. He didn't quite take it. He talked a lot about his Atlantic City experiences and all the rest of it.
I don't think he's going to be applauded by the media for that, though.
No.
And this is just it, folks. It's that kind of sycophantic nature of what it is that they are saying that is wholly disconnected from all the things that we hold near and dear in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. But unless and until we come to terms with that, unless and until we begin to fully realize what it is that is acting in such a way that is detrimental to us, it is not going to improve. I'm sorry. There is no other way around that, folks. That is just the harsh, stark reality that we face here in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. And that is why it is so important to foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution, and thereby your fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. Because you see those who are working against you. But everybody wants to say that the reason they support Trump is because he's a great businessman. Great businessman. But here's the thing. Trump has just this long litany of business failures. Long litany of business failures. The failures of his casinos, the loss of millions of dollars, the close of Trump Steak, the close of Trump Shuttle, the failure to build things, the fraud cases like those of Trump University. These things cannot be ignored. And do not think that the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media are just going to sit back and ignore these things, because we know damn well that they won't. But that has never been part of their modus operandi. It has never been part of their frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist twisted agenda. It is propaganda, but it is also not boomerang-proof. So what they are going to try and do is lay the blame for Trump's inevitable defeat at the feet of their favorite scapegoats, true, honorable, constitutional compositionists, constitutionalists. They always like to blame us, folks. They've done it in election cycle after successive election cycle, both the so-called left and right. But we're not going to tolerate it this time. They are the ones that brought this upon themselves. They have only themselves to blame. If they want to find somebody to blame, they should look in the mirror, because they are the ones that brought this excrement storm onto themselves. No one else did. No one else did. But we know that this idea from Trump of when he spoke with Varney, he said, investors, people would put money into the fund. The citizens would put money into the fund, and we will rebuild our infrastructure with that fund, and it will be a great investment. And it's going to put a lot of people to work. We need jobs because if you look, you know, the real number is not 5%. It's probably closer to 20% because people have given up looking for jobs. We need jobs. We need jobs. You look at the inner cities of our country, and I mean you have black unemployment, youth of 58% unemployment, I mean 58%, and nobody's ever seen numbers like this. I almost need a shot of whiskey to translate that, folks, but he's just going on about how the government should create jobs. Then he says, well, these would be bonds, Stuart. These would be bonds, and these would sold as bonds. So we do infrastructure bonds from the country, from the United States. We would do infrastructure bonds. We have to fix our infrastructure, but we have to fix it without cost overrun. We have to get it done properly. Like I'm building the old post office on Pennsylvania Avenue. We're under budget and ahead of schedule by over a year. That's the way we have to build. You can't have, I just left an area where they have a VA hospital that was a $1.2 billion cost overrun, okay, and it's still under construction. They don't know what's happening. They totally lost control of it. It's a VA hospital, $1.2 billion in cost overruns. It's ridiculous. I mean, the whole thing should have been built from just a fraction of what they're talking about, the cost overrun. So nobody with build better than I can, and nobody can, you know, nobody knows construction better than I can. I have great relationships with the people that are going to do the work, and they have the wrong contract system, and they may have a system that inspires cost overruns, and we can't do that. I have no idea where his train of thought was going there, folks. It was a complete mishmash of just unintelligible crap and nonsense. Literally, that is what it was. There was no bearing to reality. There was no cognizant way to fathom it other than we're going to have the United States bonds for infrastructure. Great. It's not going to work. Look, first and foremost, the government is not in a position to create jobs. That is not the position of the federal government. It is not a power that is expressly enumerated unto it within the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. That is just a simple fact of the matter. And of course, it's why we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have gone out on a limb time and again saying that if you want to put America back onto the path to prosperity, you are going to have to do it in such a way that you are strictly adhering to the fundamental tenets contained within the four corners of the Constitution and in its clear and concise language. There is no other way to go about it, folks. That is the way that our representative republic was designed to work. But Trump is woefully inadequate with respect to that. Trump is just continuing his claims of all sorts of things. And, of course, I love it how he's already setting himself up for defeat, already lowering expectations for that general election cycle that is slated for this November. He previewed a possible excuse, according to Time magazine, of saying that the election cycle is rigged. Have you ever seen anybody who just sits there and whines and complains as much as the mafioso quafioso? I've never once seen a politician complain nearly half as much as he does. And this is really something that's shocking. Now, David French over at Conservative Review has said that Trump's race to the bottom has become a sprint, and I agree. It's because he takes the bait for everything. He is small-minded when it comes to so much of what's currently facing this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns about. And that's bad. But French also said something else that's amazing. He said, I can tell the emergency in Trump world is real. His alt-right brigade is out in force today. The panic is palpable. Yes, it is. The panic is palpable because they realize now that the dandruff that he shakes out of that bleached skunk pelt on top of his smally head is not going to do a damn bit of good for our standing, both as a nation and as a people. That is the inexorable truth. It is the only truth that reigns with the utmost importance now and prominence. So what do we do to begin reining in all of the problems that face this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours? Well, it's as my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, and I have so oft-times reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. Get back to basics. Now, whether that means it's done at the grassroots level, as Texas Senator Ted Cruz has proffered, or whether it means creating the constitutional compositionist movement as we have proffered, it must begin, and it must begin now. Because make no mistake about it, folks, there is this well-orchestrated, concerted, consolidated effort to strip and deprive us of our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. That these people are attempting to foist true movement conservatives out of the rank and file of the Republican Party to ensure that we have no home. This is essentially what happened to the old conservative Democrats. People like the late Zell Miller, who gave a convention speech at the RNC back in the re-election bid for George W. Bush way back in 2004, some 12 years ago, if you can believe it. They were foisted out of their party in a well-orchestrated, consolidated effort to benign and to belittle and besmirch anyone who didn't march or goose-step in lockstep with the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist agenda. They have attempted to hijack, and they are successfully thus far hijacking the gutless opposition party in this, the 2016 presidential election cycle. Folks, there is no other way to refer to this, to analyze this. There is no other inexorable conclusion that we can, in logical and in good conscience, come to. And that is why we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have been coming onto the friendly airwaves for nearly a year now, folks, to warn you about the precarious and dangerous situation and position that the United States of America currently finds itself as I sit here speaking into this microphone, conveying this message unto you. So, again, we must come together in solidarity and unity. We must work in such a fashion that our best interests are being watched after. Because Trump is not going to do anything for us. You know, CBS had it out again that Donald Trump says he fears rigged election in November. Whether that's true or not, it's coming across as sour grapes. Remember, Aesop's fables are there to be a moral tale. They're there to discuss morality, something that has been highly lacking, extremely lacking in the course of this 2016 presidential election cycle. And I wish that weren't the case. I wish it weren't the case, because this was our election cycle to win, folks, and we blew it. We blew it by putting up the New York billionaire, businessman, real estate tycoon, and all-around Bulgarian Donald J. Trump, who also happens to go by John Barron or John Miller. Maybe he ought to tap the shoulder of one of those two alter egos and find out what the hell he's trying to accomplish here. Or maybe he ought to do what's in the best interest of the country and step out of the race. Just drop out. Let somebody who has a modicum of a chance of winning, which grows less and less with each passing day, with each successive day, step into the fray and do what's necessary to place this country back onto the path of prosperity. Again, something that is much easier said than done. And unfortunately, just to show you how high the stakes are in this 2016 presidential election cycle, we see that a failed former Democrat contender for the White House, Howard Dean, Yargy, said that he doesn't consider Iran to be a Muslim country. Yet, didn't the Ayatollah Khomeini claim that it is the Islamic Republic of Iran? I kind of thought so. I thought that's what the Revolutionary Guard was about, too. So again, here we are. People are in la-la land. No one is paying attention to the facts on the ground. No one is connected to reality, and it is ultimately the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours who is going to suffer the direct consequences and ramifications therefrom. This is really an untenable situation that the United States of America finds herself in right now. And we can't turn away from it. The reason we can't turn away from it is that if we do, we are placing ourselves in a very precarious position, one that is worse than any other position that we have previously found ourselves in within living memory. We must come back to the forefront. We must come back to what matters in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. And the only way we can do that is to come together, standing shoulder to shoulder in solidarity and unity, standing up for the things that we hold near and dear in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. With that said, I know this show is a rather brief one, but it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back for one last round of alcohol. I guarantee you folks she will not unravel on you, much like Trump has. What she will do is pour you some more alcohol. As always, folks, I'm Randy Wright, and I've been your captain, and I'd like to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. I invite you to leave any questions, comments, or concerns you may have either here on our YouTube page, our Google Plus page, or our Facebook page. And on top of that, I invite you to follow us on Twitter with the Twitter handle @RadioAviationEX. That's @RadioAviationEX. And there you will find our departure board that lists my personal Twitter account, the personal Twitter account of my first officer, Jeremy Grafenton, our Blogspot page, which has audio blogs, and our Cafe Press account that has all sorts of trinkets and goodies with our logo on it and our first passenger logo on it. Go ahead and take a look at that, folks, because you're sure to find something that'll meet your needs at a reasonable price, and it'll help support us and support yourself. So thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning into the Wright Flyer. We will see you again next time. Do take care.